They weren't just tractors. They were symbols of power, living, breathing machines that fed a nation and divided a generation. Their diesel engines didn't just run. They roared, like thunder rolling across the plains. You could smell the smoke before you saw them. You could feel the vibration through the ground before the tires even crested the hill. From one horizon came the deep green of John Deere. From the other, the bright red of International Harvester. Two colors, two empires, locked in a battle that would define American farming for half a century. This was more than a rivalry. It was a war. A war fought not with bullets, but with horsepower. Not for land, but for loyalty. And for one brief, glorious moment in history, both sides were unstoppable. But here's the question most people never ask. How did two companies build machines so tough, so reliable, that they outlasted the men who made them, only for one of them to vanish when America needed it most? This is Tractor Wars, how John Deere and International Harvester fought for diesel dominance, a story of innovation, obsession, and the sound that fed a nation. The early 1900s were years of struggle. Most farmers still plowed behind horses, fighting mud, awe, and time. Engines were rare, and when they did appear, they were temperamental beasts, heavy, loud, and prone to breaking at the worst possible moment. A tractor was a gamble, not a guarantee. But America was changing fast. Cities were rising, factories were roaring, and the hunger for efficiency was growing. Gasoline engines powered cars and trucks. Why not farms too? By the 1920s, gasoline tractors dotted the landscape, replacing horses one by one. Yet farmers quickly discovered the problem. Gas was expensive. Engines ran hot, broke easily, and gulped fuel faster than they could make profit. They needed something tougher, something that could work sunrise to sunset without complaint. And in the background, quietly, a new kind of power was emerging. Diesel. Born in factories and shipyards, diesel was the language of endurance. It burned heavier fuel, produced more torque, and ran cooler and longer than any gasoline engine. But there was one problem. Diesel engines were monsters, massive, complex, and far too heavy for the field. Until one company decided to try. International Harvester, the red giant from Chicago, had built its empire on innovation. They had already mechanized half the American farm, but in the midst of the Great Depression, they dared to think bigger. If they could harness diesel for agriculture, they could own the future. In 1935, they did the impossible. The International WD-40 rolled off the line, not the spray can in your garage, but the first American diesel tractor ever built. It was rugged, loud, and stubborn, but it worked. 4 cylinders of raw endurance that could run all day on a fraction of the fuel. For struggling farmers, that difference meant survival. John Deere watched carefully from across the Midwest. They had built their reputation on reliability. The famous 2-cylinder Johnny Poppers that filled the countryside with that familiar pop, pop, pop. Those tractors were icons, simple, dependable. But in an age of progress, that sound was starting to feel old. Gasoline was falling out of favor. Diesel was the future. And Deere did not have it. Then came war. World War II changed everything. Diesel became the heartbeat of the Allied war machine. Tanks, ships, and landing craft, all powered by compression ignition. Factories that once built tractors were now churning out engines for battle. And when the war ended, those factories, and the men who worked in them, returned home. So did diesel. The farmers who had served overseas had seen what diesel could do. They came home ready to replace gasoline forever. The year was 1949. From Waterloo, Iowa, John Deere unveiled a new kind of tractor, the Model R, their first diesel. It started on gasoline, then switched to diesel once it warmed up. A strange hybrid system, but it worked like magic. The The sound was deep, slow, and strong. The kind of noise that didn't just turn heads, it shook windows. And just like that, the tractor wars had begun. Across the Midwest, the rivalry turned into legend. County fairs became battlegrounds. Green and red lined up side by side, pulling sleds, kicking up dust, and leaving clouds of smoke rolling behind them. Crowds cheered, bets were made, and farmers argued for hours about torque and traction. It wasn't just competition, it was identity. In some towns, your color mattered more than your politics. Fathers passed down their loyalty like they passed down their land. If your dad ran Harvester red, you did too. If your granddad swore by John Deere, you stayed green. By the 1950s, both companies were pushing the limits. Harvester's Farmall line was everywhere, efficient, muscular, and proven. The Farmall Super M diesel could pull almost anything. The smell of its exhaust was as familiar as fresh-cut hay. But Deere was catching up fast. The 70 diesel, the 720, the mighty 830, each model stronger, cleaner, more efficient than the last. That two-cylinder rhythm became a roar that defined a generation of farmers. Every sale, every field, every contest added fuel to the fire. The tractor wars weren't fought on TV. They were fought in fields, barns, and repair shops across the nation. America was booming. The 1950s were a golden age of growth. Diesel power didn't just fuel tractors, it powered progress. From road construction to grain harvest, these machines were the backbone of the post-war dream. And yet, success brought new challenges. By the early 1960s, farmers demanded more comfort, more control, more speed. They wanted tractors that didn't just pull, they performed. John Deere answered with the new generation of power. 4- and 6-cylinder diesels, advanced hydraulics, power shift transmissions. The 3010 and 4010 tractors changed everything. Farming was no longer just work, it was precision. International Harvester tried to match it with their 706 and 806 models. And for a time they did. But inside the company, cracks were forming. Strikes, debt, and corporate overreach started to choke the once mighty red giant. John Deere, meanwhile, stayed laser-focused. They didn't build the most models, they built the right ones. And as the 1970s rolled in, Deere had quietly taken control of the American heartland. Still, the war wasn't over. Both brands continued to innovate. The fields of the 1970s thundered with bigger, bolder machines. Dual wheels, turbos, and massive fuel tanks. Tractors that could pull 4 plows at once and never slow down. But while the machines grew, the farmers were struggling. The economy shifted, fuel prices spiked, and the farm crisis of the 1980s hit like a hammer. For International Harvester, it was fatal. Decades of expansion caught up to them. Debt piled high. In 1985, the unthinkable happened. IH sold its agricultural division to Tenneco. The red lived on under a new name, Case YH. But the company that had started the diesel revolution was gone. John Deere stood alone, victorious but changed. The war that had once driven innovation had ended in silence. Today, that silence is being broken again, not by new machines but by old ones coming back to life. Across America, barns and sheds hide sleeping legends. A Farmall Super M, its paint faded but intact. Still, the war wasn't over. Both brands continued to innovate. The fields of the 1970s thundered with bigger, bolder machines. Dual wheels, turbos, and massive fuel tanks. Tractors that could pull 4 plows at once and never slow down. But while the machines grew, the farmers were struggling. The economy shifted. Fuel prices spiked, and the farm crisis of the 1980s hit like a hammer. For International Harvester, it was fatal. Decades of expansion caught up to them. Debt piled high. In 1985, the unthinkable happened. IH sold its agricultural division to Tenneco. The red lived on under a new name, Case YH. But the company that had started the diesel revolution was gone. John Deere stood alone, victorious but changed. The war that had once driven innovation had ended in silence. Today, that silence is being broken again, not by new machines, but by old ones coming back to life. Across America, barns and sheds hide sleeping legends. A Farmall Super M, its paint faded but intact. A Deere 720, dust-covered but waiting. Turn the key, and time itself wakes up. The starter groans, the engine coughs, a puff of smoke. Then, that sound, that deep rumbling diesel heartbeat that no modern engine can replicate. Collectors and restorers across the country are keeping the war alive, not out of rivalry, but reverence. At antique tractor shows, red and green sit side by side. Engines idle in harmony, the air filled with nostalgia and pride. Fathers point at the tractors they once drove. Grandkids cover their ears and smile. It's not just a hobby, it's heritage. Because these machines weren't disposable. They were built to last. Heavy steel, simple mechanics, pure engineering honesty. Even after decades in the dirt, they can still work, still pull, still prove their worth. And that's the real lesson of the tractor wars. Competition didn't destroy these companies. It pushed them to greatness. Every breakthrough, every improvement, every roar of diesel was born from rivalry. John Deere refined the science of reliability. International Harvester defined the spirit of endurance. Together, they gave America more than machines. They gave it power, progress, and pride. If you grew up in that world, you remember the sounds. The hiss of hydraulics, the metallic tick of cooling engines after sunset, the smell of diesel mixed with dust and rain. It wasn't noise, it was life. And if stories like this bring those memories back, don't forget to subscribe, because every week we dig up another piece of America's mechanical past, another story of steel, smoke, and the people who made it all move. The tractor wars are long over, but the colors remain. Green still rolls through the fields, red still glows in the sun, and in every barn,